Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Outlier Detected, a podcast brought to you by the Data Science Institute Student Council at Columbia University, which is exclusively dedicated to individuals with stories in data science that stand out. I am Dashansh, a member of the council and a current graduate student at Columbia University. I'm very excited to host today's episode. So let's get started. In the previous episode, we talked about artificial intelligence and art. Today, we'll take a step at a few of the different roles that exist in the data science space and also explore its entrepreneurship aspect. This time, we don't have one but two extremely talented and accomplished guests, Aarshay Jain and Keerti Agrawal. So please welcome Aarshay and Keerti.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Hey, thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure to connect back to the DSI community.
Yeah, the pleasure is all ours. So, to give a brief introduction, Aarshay and Keerti are peer alumni from the class of 2017 of Masters in Data Science program at Columbia University. After graduating, both of them worked for Spotify for 3 years and have recently founded a data science and machine learning consulting firm called Aagmann.ai. So, Aarshay and Keerti, would you like to introduce yourself further and share your background and maybe even tell why you got interested in data science?
Sure. You want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hey guys, so I'm Keerti. I'm a 2017 grad, as Deshaun said. Before coming to Columbia, I was working in India. I worked here for almost 2 years, exploring different aspects. And when I was working in India, I realized I wanted to get more exposure on data science and machine learning technologies. And one of the reasons I got motivated was because of my mentors. And they were always pushing me one step ahead. And I started looking for opportunities and exposures. And I came across this amazing program at Columbia and decided to apply for it. Biggest motivation actually was to get exposed to the amazing machine learning and AI work that is going on in US and across the world. And that was my motivation to pursue this.
Sounds great. Yeah. So for me, I think like you covered most of the part around DSI and Columbia, but to go a little bit back, where this started was around the final year of my undergrad education, which was apparently in manufacturing and automation. So like nothing to do with data science or even computer science. So I tried a bunch of things. Like I tried getting into core manufacturing, which was not super interesting. And then I got into robotics towards my final later third year and fourth year. And that's when I got introduced to like these algorithms and data science, and then it picked up. And then I started off with like some business analytics consulting work for a year in India, but I wanted to get into core data sciences. So then I pursued the master's program, and you guys know the rest.
Yes, that sounds absolutely wonderful. I mean, I have seen both of your profiles, and I've seen that mostly it is very similar. Like after undergrad, both of you worked for 2 years, and after that, you started your Columbia journey, and after Columbia journey, you worked at Spotify, and even after that, you opened your firm. So it's really interesting.
That's a really good observation, I would say.
Okay. So actually one thing that both of you have different is your roles. So Aarshay is a machine learning engineer while Keerti worked as a data scientist. And when many newcomers come to this field, they often come across this roles like machine learning engineer, then data analyst, then data scientist, then so on. And they often wonder what each of these entails. So my first question would be like, can you describe your role in a little bit detail and how it differs from, other roles?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds. I can take a stab at it. So first thing, right? Like I think there is no like industry-wide definition of these roles. They vary a lot across industry. So particularly talking about tech, they create a differentiation between data scientists and machine learning engineers. But if you go into say finance and other places, data science, the roles are pretty much mingled. And I think like in tech, I see the core difference being at your point of impact. So if you're a data scientist, you usually drive product decisions and like product strategy. So you would do analytics and understand the data, mostly understanding historical data, and then giving product direction into what we should do next. And if you're an MLE, then you're more on the engineering side. And then your impact is on the product, on the user most of the times. So we, like as an MLE, I build products which the end user was using. So I would train ML models and then deploy them, which could be in real time setting or in a batch prediction setting, but all of them would eventually get into the hands of the user in some form. So I think that's where like the core differentiation happens. And then in order to do those, the kinds of roles and the tech stack we use also differ a lot. And we can go into it. But Preeti, does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally agree with Aarshay. And just to add to this, even within like data scientist job, there could be multiple roles that you can play. So when I joined Spotify, I was doing a lot of predictive modeling work. But at some point, I started looking for working more with user-related products. And I started working with this team voice in personalization. And there, the role is totally different, where you are working with PMs, engineers, designers, and helping them make a strong case of why we need to do this and why not this, helping them with experimentations, and finally helping them take the higher level product strategy decisions. So I guess, as Aarshay said, it's not a properly defined definition on any of these. It differs a lot, but I would say, yeah, I mean, whenever you go out and look at a data scientist position, just look at the job description as well and not just the name.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So Aarshay, would you say like machine learning engineering is kind of more inclined towards software development, or it borrows a lot of principles from the software developing?
Yeah, totally. I think like if you want to get down the path of being a machine learning engineer, you cannot shy away from writing code. And that would actually be maybe like 80% of your job. Though I would say you're probably not writing you're not writing the same code as a core backend or a front-end engineer is writing, but you're still expected to generate that production grade quality. And like to maybe go a little bit more into how that works is really, for example, if you're working at the scale of Spotify, your data is not gonna fit into a system or a pre-processing step, which could fit into a notebook. So firstly, even if you want to get training data for your model, you have to run like a distributed data pipeline. And there are like various technologies and tools out there. I have used Beam, which is based on both Java and Python. At Spotify had their own internal tool based on Scala. So, like you have to be open to learning any new programming language or any new tool which comes your way. And usually bigger companies have pretty strong opinions on how they define a data pipeline, or they have like specified standards which you got to follow. So there's a lot of support. You get a lot of support from software engineers, but you cannot say that, oh, I'm only going to work in a notebook and not after that. So once you have that big data, you got to convert it into a training data set. Then you got to train your model, which would again happen on the cloud. So you have to be able to convert your Python scripts into deployable models, and like it would usually work like Spotify was mostly Google Cloud. So we used a lot of AI platform and those kind of services where you have a Python package, you convert it into a Docker container, deploy it, and then you can run it at scale. You can do distributed computing, use GPUs, you got to do all of that. So that requires skills beyond just a Jupyter notebook. And then it doesn't end there really, because even if you have a model, now you got to put it into the product, right? Like for example, I worked on a model which is trying to predict what is the right time to show an ad to a user. Now, if you're trying to do that, then your model has to make predictions in real time for millions of users who are using the app together. So you got to deploy it into a backend service. Now, in that setting, like you would have a lot of software engineering support or like backend engineers who are running the service, but you still have to be able to adjust it, modify it, understand that code, and fit your model into a piece of it. So like modeling will be one part of that entire chain. So you don't have to worry about all of that, but at least you got to worry about the model. And I think like there's a lot of tooling coming out these days around MLOps and serverless, which you could use. But mostly in bigger companies, they have pretty strong opinions about how they do things. So you got to follow them, and you cannot say no to those things.
Okay. So you are not expected to be a complete software engineer, but you should at least be comfortable and not fear away from coding or learning new languages.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one other follow-up to Kirti is that I have seen that data science positions could be industry specific. Like, do you feel like there is a skill difference between data science in being an IT company versus data science being in finance company?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as I said before, the roles are very much different across the industry and across the domain. If you are in finance, you might be as a data scientist making the trading models and those kind of things. But in a product company, you might not be doing a lot of modeling. You are working more on product strategies and trying to help the team make the decisions, doing the experimentations, and a lot of core research work. So yeah, I mean, from my experience, given that I have worked in different kind of domains, I have realized that there is not a very common definition and common job description across these.
Okay, that sounds fair. So
I think like also to add to that,
yeah.
like to give you a practical example, for example, after Columbia, I was interviewing for multiple jobs. So I had an offer from this company called Octane Lending, and they were trying to make insurance or like lending decisions in real time. So they had their models running in a web interface, and you instantly get a decision on whether you're getting a loan or not. And there, my role, the offer I had was of a data scientist, but I was expected to do everything. And then I interned at Boxed. Again, there they also offered me data science intern, but I actually intentionally asked them to change the title to machine learning engineer intern so that it's actually clear around what I'm doing, and I can, it helps me in applying to tech companies. So, like all these things happen, and you got to work around your things.
Okay, I see like there's no consensus even among the companies like what constitute as a data scientist or even a machine learning engineer.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So okay, so you guys have like plenty of experience working as either machine learning engineer or data scientist. So I wonder could you talk about one of your most interesting projects that you have worked on?
I guess I would start. This was my first project at Spotify, and it was more related to time series forecasting of user growth, some of the financial numbers, and it was the first time for me working in the real setting. When you come out of academia and go to industry, then you realize, okay, whatever you learned, it's time to apply it and learn new things as well. And I was working on the project. It generally when we are in academia, we get the structured data, we get everything sorted out. The data has been collected, it's structured, and you just have to learn how to fit a good model through it and what kind of features are there. But when you actually go into real life problems, then first of all, it took me like 2 months to collect the actual data that I could use to do the time series forecasting. So this was like biggest challenge, because in such an organization, there are so many teams collecting different kinds of data, and you need to figure out, okay, where is the campaign data? Okay, where is this data, and where is that data that you can use? Which I never realized when I was in Columbia, that, okay, this process might take that much time. So it was challenging, but you learn a lot from it, is that, not everything is given you the way that you just have to put the model and get away with it. So that was quite challenging. And working with different kind of models, talking to different kind of teams, how this model can affect their team's performance and those kind of things. I think it was the first project. It was quite challenging, and at the end, it was really good because I get to network with so many people at Spotify, and the output was good. Everything was working fine. So yeah, I would say that was quite a learning experience for me.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And how about you, Aarshay? Do you have one?
Yeah, I think like more than interesting, I would say like it almost was baffling to me when I was working on this project. I mean, this is most of my time at Spotify was working on ad personalization. And so there, like just looking at the system, right, like you got to make an ML prediction, but there is so much which goes on after that prediction before it is actually served to a user that the delta around, even if you increase your model accuracy by say 5%, you may not actually get any tangible gain in the business metric like click rate, because like there are so many other constraints, like oh, now we have these many ads, this ad is finishing its cycle, it's about to end, we have to serve these many impressions within the next month because we have a compliance on it. So like there are so many factors which go on top of an ML model before a decision is made, that really, if you want to impact the click rate using just the ML model, it sometimes becomes impossible. And that's why we decided to split our teams into two parts, which is like a 4-member team working on the product, on the model, and a 4-member team working on just the decisioning after the model prediction. And then I intentionally choose to join that team because I wanted to understand how that really works. And like it was super interesting. Like we end up spending just 1 quarter refactoring our backend service so that we can change that logic, because those logics would seldom be just hard coded into the system and some weird rules. So we had to like spend a full quarter so that we can include like that into our A/B testing framework. And so I mean it was just like super interesting to know. And you have to, again, I'm going to repeat myself, but you have to be open to these kinds of situations and these kinds of problems if you want to become an ML engineer.
Okay, yeah, that sounds interesting too. It's really inspiring the work that you guys do. Okay, so actually, one more question. Like, I think you mentioned some of the tools before. So I wonder, like, Ashay, like, what are the tools that you use as an ML engineer?
So the tools, again, like we use, like for example, Docker is we don't do anything without Docker. That's a pretty basic standard one. Docker, Git, and obviously some cloud, Docker, Git, which you get very little experience actually in school around these things. And you tend to do a lot of pair programming, software engineering practices, like writing tests for your code and writing integration tests. And like, how do you make sure if you trained your model in a notebook, when you put it into production, how do you make sure it's giving you the right answer? Like it may not fail, it's still going to give you a probability, but it has to be the same one as you got in the Python environment. So like, how do you write a test to ensure that? So, like all those interesting concepts and principles come into play, which would, and it would enrich you, but also baffle you at the same time.
And what about you, Kirti? I mean, data scientists would do more than just analysis. They have to, get the data out of databases, warehouse, then do exploratory data analysis and visualization, then perform some tests and so on. So, what kind of tools other than Python and R do you use?
Along with what you mentioned, Python, Jupyter notebooks, visualizations, we do use a lot of BigQuery to get the data. And along with all these, our data scientists at Spotify work very, very closely with user researchers. So we also work with the platforms like Quicksilver, Qualtrics to figure out how to launch the campaign, what kind of users are going to get which kind of campaign, and then basically use a mixed modeling approach where you combine the quantitative and qualitative data together to figure out the overall user behavior, which is very important at Spotify, because if someone is saying, okay, in the survey, I dislike this feature, we really, really want to know why do you dislike this feature. And that's why we combine that with the quantitative data to get the whole picture. So this is something which is helping Spotify a lot in improving their products, especially the newly launched products, because sometimes you don't understand the user expectation the way you think you can. So these are mostly the tools that we use in day to day.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Like I haven't heard of many of the tools that you name, but yeah. So I assume many of these tools you might have learned through your job and not um, before in while your program at Columbia. So if you have to recommend someone anything, your tool or technology trending right now to someone who is just searching for internship or job, is there any recommendation for them?
I would say for a data scientist position, not particularly a tool, but we don't learn a lot about experimentations when we are in academia in the program. And a lot of people expect you to know about a lot of hypothesis testing, what kind of solutions, significance and p-value and those kind of stuff. We learn those stuff, but we don't combine it with the product while in academia. So a lot of case studies that we ask are related to that in terms of, okay, if we have to run this kind of experiment, how would you go ahead and do that? And a lot of responses that we have seen is like people generally do not know a lot about it. And I would say this is one of the very important factors while interviewing for a data scientist is how much you can tell about experimentation, even if you haven't done anything before in terms of launching a realistic experiment, but you need to have that kind of statistical knowledge to work as a data scientist and doing all the experimentation stuff.
Okay. And Aarshay, do you have any?
I would say just know Git and Docker would take you a long way. And just basic software engineering principles, like writing object-oriented programming and testing. So, if you're exposed to some of those things, it would definitely help.
Okay, thanks for the recommendation. So to end the Spotify section, I want to ask one final question. That is, how was your day-to-day life like in Spotify, and how was your overall experience?
Okay, so I guess I can go. My day-to-day life was actually before pandemic. I don't want to talk after pandemic because there is a lot of difference. But when we used to be in office, used to start with a couple of hours of working on some of the core research work that you're doing, and then most of the afternoons used to go in the meetings, talking to PMs, making product strategies, talking about new feature launches, talking about experimentation strategies. So that was most of my days. You have at most 3 hours to work, and next 5 hours you are in the meetings. So yeah, that was mostly it.
I think for me, I would say it varied over times, but as I grew again, it was not that different for me pre and post pandemic. But for me, it's going to be mostly around a day of stand up. So first thing in the morning, you go there, you discuss what you've done, you make a plan for the day. And then I did a lot of pair programming. So you would work with your co-engineers, and you're working on some feature or some PR. By PR, I mean a pull request in GitHub. So if you're working on a PR, then sometimes you got to work together. You just sit on the same computer, and then one person is coding, other person is just discussing. You take turns pairing, because sometimes you are senior and you want to guide the other person so that they can take it up next time. or there could be multiple reasons to do pair programming, and that easily would take like an hour or 2 hours or sometimes more of that. And after that, I think like we also did a lot of PR review. So as part of an ML engineer, no code goes in, which is like every code which goes in has to be looked at by at least two people. So like one person who's writing the code and one more person at least, if not more. So, then you would spend an hour or so looking at other people's PR, which have to be merged and, so that the code gets shipped out. So that there would time go in there. We would obviously have a lot of meetings. You would be surprised at how many meetings we had. So to reduce our number of meetings itself, so like, it's gonna be all around planning, and the more senior you get, the more you have to start involving in those plannings and strategic kind of meetings as compared to when you are earlier in your career. So I think that was fun. And then one thing good at Spotify is like there were a lot of training opportunities. So all the technologies that you want to use there is some training for it, which is like maybe a week long, or sometimes it's like an ongoing thing. So like we would spend some time of our week doing that as well.
Okay, your experience sounds amazing. And
Okay. One more thing is
yeah,
a
sure.
meeting 3 day is a myth.
Yeah, like so meeting free days basically, like since we had so many meetings and everyone would complain we don't have time to work, like there would be sometimes Spotify level mandates that Wednesday is no meeting day for the R&D team. But still, like I mean, we in engineering we would enjoy that. People seldom would, break that. But I think for
Not
data
for
scientists,
product people.
not
No.
for product.
Okay, even though it may sound hectic, it's almost like sounds really, really fun and interesting. So, like you had like an amazing experience at Spotify, but however, you decided to come back to India and found your own data science and machine learning consulting firm. So, I want to know like what was your inspiration behind this?
So I would go. I think for me personally, I think it probably varies a little bit. But for me, when I went to the US, that was always the plan to come back and do something of my own. It's partly because my entire family is in business. My dad has a business, a traditional Indian business. Everyone I know is doing business. So I always had that passion of doing something of my own. I don't really like to work for others. My core reason behind going to US was education and the experience so that I can start something of my own. So that was the biggest thing. And like why. And yeah, one more thing is around like staying together with family, and we are as Indians inherently social people. And I think like it varies for different people. It like varies by individual, but you have different social experiences in the US, and then I just missed what I had here. That's why I wanted to come back.
For me, I guess it was more around. So I'm a person who is like most of the time active on LinkedIn, just looking into what's happening in India, listening to Indian news, living in US. So I had a lot of. I came across a lot of things that are going on in India, and people are doing a lot of good stuff. And that was a good motivation for me, given that this is like my country, no visa issues, nothing. I have the flexibility to do whatever I want. And given that India is booming with some of the really good fintech startups, healthcare startups, and whatnot. And that was the biggest motivation, is like, if I go back to India, I have the opportunity to actually explore some of these options and do something of my own. And I think we both aligned in the same direction, and that made us take the decision to come back.
Yeah, I think that was kind of always the plan. We were just trying to pace it out.
Yeah.
And I think like we got married maybe 2 years after Colombia, and then that was always kind of the plan in the back of our mind, that when do we want to plan and move back. And I think the pandemic kind of changed our plans a little bit, but but we were pretty clear on that from the get-go.
Okay, yeah, cool. So, Was there like any benefit in starting your startup in India versus US? Like, is there an opportunity in India better?
Mm.
You go.
Okay, yeah. So I think so. It's not just about opportunity. I think if you want to start something in tech, probably US is more friendly. But being an international citizen, there are visa constraints. For example, on H1B, you're not allowed to do something of your own. You have to be part of a company who can sponsor you. So that is one. And then, I mean, we were on F1 visa. I think like we were pretty clear we want to go back, so we didn't even get our H1Bs approved. But still, even if we had those, we would not be able to do it. One, secondly, like doing it in the US is like a lot higher living costs, and like you can burn through your savings pretty quickly. And India provides you a little safer, familiar environment to work. And even after a stressful, like starting something up could be super stressful. So you have family and you have other, a lot of other things which you can use to distract your mind away from times when you fail. So there's a lot of factors. And more than that, I think a third thing would be around definitely opportunity. Even though US is the best place, but in India things are growing really, really well. The startup ecosystem is really nice. And I think like you can, if you want to do something, there is ample opportunity, ample funding opportunity. Like literally, like as soon as I changed my LinkedIn profile from Spotify to Aagmann.ai, like there was like investors just like reaching out to you from from their side. Oh, what are you doing? We are interested in learning more about you. And so there's like, I was just like super surprised to see that, and I didn't even know that before I came. But like this is something super cool. Plus you tend to be like slightly, maybe you've been in the States and you've had an international experience, so then you kind of stand out among a lot of things which are happening in India. So that also helps a little bit sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. Hmm. Actually, I thought that, I was of the mind that data science is relatively newer in India. It might be common in the urban cities, but considering whole India, I think it's relatively new. And we have seen like software engineering consultancy companies in India, like TCS and Wipro and so on. But a consultancy company that focuses on data science and machine learning is also relatively new. So I thought like that would be like greatest, attracting factor for you.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, there are companies, we know like a lot of companies that exist and doing good in this domain, but this is an ever growing thing. There are a lot of companies which are looking for the help with setting up their machine learning models, the deployment and those kind of stuff. And sometimes they either don't want to spend that much on a full-time role and looking for something short time. So there are a lot of opportunities in this domain. So definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think like to add to that, definitely you're right that there is less supply, but that's good. And there, I would also say that like selling those services in India is still not that mature. So we have been mostly focused on the West when we try to find clients and when we try to like sell our services, because that's where the real value is. Still, if you think about most of the companies in India, they're not using their data properly, unless they are like the latest upcoming tech companies. We've had a couple of conversations with Indian companies as well, but most of our outreach has been directed towards the West.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fair. So could you like tell us about what Aagmann.ai is and what roles are you taking up in this startup?
Sure. So we co-founded this company in 2020 October when we came back from States. And earlier, through some contacts, we took some clients and started working. But this year we got really active and have started reaching out to people. And in that, the roles are mostly depends on what kind of project we are getting, what kind of involvement is required, because I'm still working with Spotify as a contractor, so I can't give a lot of time working on these projects. So Aarshay has been handling most of those clients. I have started a little bit of scaling up, so business scaling and that kind of work, talking to more people to understand their needs, and trying to see where can we fit properly. And that has been our roles and responsibilities. Going ahead, that's what we are trying to do, is talking to more people, trying to understand if we fit in Indian startup ecosystem as well. But yeah, anything to add, Aarshay?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of, maybe we should have clarified this earlier. I think our idea is, one, this is kind of, it feels like a stopgap solution. We are doing consulting for now, but the idea is to do this, feel the market, and then figure out what kind of products we can make. So, we don't plan to be a traditional strategic consulting kind of a company. And we are pretty clear that is not, even now, we don't take that kind of projects. We have been offered things like, hey, can you do this analysis for us and give us one time? But we mostly focus on tactile projects where we can take a machine learning model and we deploy it into a product. So, we still want to stick our roots to the ML ops and ML deployment, and not just, ad hoc analysis and data science. So that is the kind of clients that we have been targeting, and that is the kind of work we've been accepting. And I think it's still pretty early on. I think just start of this year was pretty much when we got active. Last year, I was just taking it easy after coming back. I took the rest of 4 months off. I think Keerti was mostly just working on Spotify stuff. So, it's only been 5 months since we've been active. We've been fortunate to get 2-3 clients, which have kind of come and gone, some long term. One of them is ongoing. One of them, it just came, we did it for 3 months, then we deployed, and then it was out. So, we are doing multiple things. We're also thinking around what kind of products we can build. For example, right now, hiring in India is a big challenge. As we think about scaling, we have to figure out, what kind of people can we hire? And when I start to talk to people and understand what's really here, I think I'm finding it really hard to get those people unless if I find the right fit, then they are really experienced people and really expensive, which I cannot afford. So, we're also thinking around training, we can hire people and train them. And even potentially just this ML ops and ML deployment training could be useful in general. So, we've been taking a mix of product and consulting, and we'll see where it takes us. But, it's still too early to say, where this is headed.
Okay, yeah, cool. So, right now, is your company facing any competition, fears, something like that?
I would say it's too early to say. There are definitely a lot of other players in this domain who have US clients, Singapore clients, and all over the world, I would say. And it's not a competition, because there is a lot of supply and need for this kind of work. So I don't think there exists this sharp competition that if you can exist, IP cannot exist, right? Both the things can exist and run in parallel. Yeah, I mean, I won't say there's this huge competition.
Yeah, I agree. I think also we are a little too early to, because we have just one data scientist who's working for us full time. So we're just a team of 3, right? And we only take up projects through first connections. We have not tried to just do strong marketing and, get our name out there and try to get clients. We have mostly been taking a little bit slower steps towards figuring out what we want to do and how we want to take it forward. Most of the clients we have had right now have mostly been through friends of friends, and that kind of networking, not really any marketing or.
Okay. But would you say if you had started in US, the competition would have been much fiercer than in India?
Uh, maybe I think like yeah I'm not sure if like I think this kind of setting probably doesn't work in the US because like what is our value add, right? Like if we were in the US, our pricing would be much higher. So unless we can create a product which solves a general problem, it's hard to just run an ML consulting thing in the US. Right now, what we have kind of we are targeting startups which have money, but not like a lot of money, and they're looking for like a quarter kind of a quarterly engagement where you come in for 2-3 months, do that job, and you're done. So but I think you would face competitions both ways. If we decide to go route down the consulting route, stronger, we are pretty sure we will end up facing a lot more competition than we do right now. And but yeah, let's see. Time will tell, I guess.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So, so before concluding, could you, if you had the opportunity to go back and do something differently, then what would it be?
I'm gonna go first. Okay. So I think one of the things I realized quite later on after graduating from Columbia was we used to have so many classes going on across the campus, and you have a lot to gain. You have a lot to learn in that scenario. So that 1.5 year is like really really important for the future. And what I missed was just go into any class, sit there, learn what's going on, and see what all they teach there. So I think I never did that. And I know some people who actually got engaged like that, and I was like, okay, maybe that is a good opportunity when you're in Columbia to just try these things out and see if you like something out of your curriculum, and yeah, if given a chance, I would definitely like to do that.
I think like for me, I would say I had my fair bit of experimentation at Columbia, but like for me, I think I would probably try to work at a smaller company. So like when I was graduating from Columbia, I was kind of in that at that space whether I should join a startup or much smaller company where I would learn things from ground up versus company like Spotify where there would be already like preset infrastructure and like a lot of already good base to work on. So you are more efficient, but then you don't learn how to work from scratch. But I think like like Spotify ended up being a good trade-off because their ML infrastructure was like really, really just starting to build out when I joined, and I was able to actually contribute a lot to it. So that was good. But I think like if I would change something, would be like maybe for 1 year I would just like leave Spotify and work for a startup from the very ground up and get that experience, which I'm now getting with consulting. But it would have been fun to do that in the US.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds very true and inspiring. So finally, do you have any advice to the people who are, fresh incoming graduates or the young entrepreneurs who are trying to break into data science space?
Yeah. For the people who are trying to look into different internships or full-time roles in data science, I would say this, as we discussed, right, this is not a very defined area across like US, even in India and other parts. Uh, but read through the job description very carefully, try to understand what this role involves, what kind of thing you are particularly interested in, and if that matches your expectation. And like don't have this thinking in your mind, okay, data science means this, and MLE, machine learning, means this. So that's one thing. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think like for me, again, I would just repeat my standard advice around have like clear expectations around when you're joining industry, you would be expected to do a lot more than just ML and data science. So be ready to do that and like try to get experience around these tools. If you want to work in like MLE position in tech, like try to get this exposure to Docker and Git, because I think like even if you do an internship, like these systems are so much complicated that even to our interns, we would generally not expose them to this.
It's not enough
to
time during
it's not enough time for them to onboard onto this and actually create value. And we don't expect interns to create real value, but like even feel good about finishing a project end to end. So we try to involve them partially and give them projects which are like good to haves, generally help them get a data set and just like do ML. So like even if you intern somewhere, you would kind of feel like most of the job is doing ML, but that would not be true if you start working full time. So, like try to get exposure to Git, Docker, all these tools wherever you can. And I think like secondly, you also mentioned around like entrepreneurs who are trying to get into the DS space. So from my experience, right, like I think like starting something in DS as a consulting, as a B2B kind of an engagement is it tends to be really hard, because I actually tried something in Colombia. Like during Colombia internship time, I actually did not intern at any company. I started a company with like 3 other DSI folks. I don't know if you know, like Andrew, Carl, myself, and Brett. We were like 4 people. We started this company, Metrics Labs, we called it. And then we were trying to help hospital management like improve their administrative work and like use ML AI to be better, more efficient. But we realized, right, that B2B sales and getting client data is extremely hard. There is so much scrutiny these days around data security. If there's a leak, it costs millions of dollars. And recently I was working with helping a friend on a startup, and we are trying to get client data, and there are like so many compliances. They gave us like 100-pager checklist which we need to fulfill, which is like almost impossible for a startup to do. So when you try to, if you think about getting into this data science B2B space, like think very carefully and like like just try to feel it a little bit before going all in into it. So
yeah, GDPR is like the data privacy and those kind of things have picked up a lot in, I would say, a couple of years. And be very sure with any of the startup you're doing is how your data is, where your data is, and who is using your data. I think that's one of the biggest things these days.
Okay, yeah, that's very fair advice. And since we are at the end, so I would just like to say like thank you very much for joining us. It has been a real pleasure to have this conversation with you. And also I wish you good luck for your startup. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us. And we loved talking about Colombia again. Yeah, thank you.
yeah, thank you. It was fun.
Yeah.
I hope this is useful for the folks who listen to it.
Yeah, definitely. It will definitely be useful.
Awesome.